Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Redgate's Community Circle. This is the reporting services class, one of several classes that are actually kind of winding down in the next week or two. Kendra Little is teaching beginning T-SQL. Grant Fritchie is teaching a query tuning class. I really need to take a look at that one for sure. And Steve Jones is doing a DAX Power BI class, so be sure to check those out. There's quite a few things that we've done for Community Circle over the last couple of months. Something new that just started last week. You can go out and go out and find the recordings though. Grant Fritchie is having some conversations with community experts and leaders about cloud-based data management. So be sure to check that out. As I mentioned, today is the last session for the Introduction to SQL Server Reporting Services. And today, we're going to talk about deploying and managing reports. And as I put this material together, I thought, wow, we could have a whole 3 or 4 hour course just on this topic. But however, since this is meant to be an introduction for people building reports, we're going to keep it to the basics. And hopefully you learn a lot and it gets you interested in delving more into the topic on your own. So we still have another number of resources. We've got this live class through Zoom that you're watching right now. You can go back and find the videos on Redgate's Community Circle playlist on YouTube, or you can also find it in the Community Circle area on Redgate. There is a GitHub repo where I'm saving all of the files as far as homework solution, slides, that type of thing. There's also a forum where you can go out and ask questions. And I know that a lot of you will be watching this course over the next year, months or years from now, and we'll still keep that going and I'll still watch it in case any questions come up. And there is an article. It is an older article from 2014, but it does cover quite a few of the things that we're talking about today, so be sure to check that out as well. So one of the most important things when you're deploying reports is security. I would say that's the #1 thing. And the way that security works in reporting services, it really works great with Active Directory. And I know some places may not want to have that or may want to have reports on the web. I'm not going to cover that. There are other ways to take care of it. And I have to say, I have never really worked with this outside of a Windows organization or a Microsoft organization. So I'm going to just tell you, again, we're talking about the basics. We're talking about the basic way security works, assuming that you have Active Directory in place, or basically a Microsoft network in place. So there's really 2 main levels of security. You have security of the reporting services site itself. Basically, if someone should not run a report, they should not see the report. Okay, so if they shouldn't see a report and then click it and get an error. We really don't want that to happen. If you can't have access to the report, you shouldn't be able to see it. The next level of security is at the database level. So at the database level, you can set up security in the data source to pass through the person's Active Directory account. And there's a number of options. Again, this topic today could be a 3 or 4 hour discussion. You can set up just a specific account that can access the data. So you can really do it two ways, either like a generic account that has rights to the data, or that user's account itself. So if I can run a report, then theoretically, I should also be able to access the data. So if there's a discrepancy between those two, then things are not configured correctly. Another thing to keep in mind is if we want that individual's account to have the permissions inside the database, sometimes you'll run into this problem called the double hop problem. And it's really a security feature. Basically, it says that if I log on to a server, that server cannot make a request on my behalf unless I specifically configure that with this thing called Kerberos. I've actually created I believe about a 2-hour class on Pluralsight just on Kerberos and reporting services configuration. Just that little piece. So again, we could talk for hours on this topic. So one thing, maybe I'll make this assumption today, is that you are going to be the person creating the reports, and somebody else, probably a database administrator, will be the person deploying the reports and managing them. Okay? So really, what I'll end up showing you is basically how to get things working on your own laptop, not really in an environment. Again, it would just be impossible. I'd have to have a much bigger setup for my demos, for one thing. I'm just running it on one virtual machine. And when I've done demos on Kerberos, I usually have about 4 to 5 different virtual machines, including a domain controller, and I have to have administrator rights over everything. I'm going to assume that someone developing reports probably is not going to have that. So let's take a look at a little bit more. I thought there was more on security. So at the reporting services level, you have this thing called roles, and the roles give kind of broad permissions divided into different areas. Do I want this user or group of users to be able to publish reports, or do I want users or groups of users to be able to view reports in this folder? And I didn't say this on the last slide, so I'm going to say it now, is that you should not configure security at the report level. What you should do is configure it at the folder level. Another thing is that you can give somebody rights to a folder without giving them rights to a parent folder. It is possible to do that. However, it won't work when the person goes to run the report. So let's say you give them the exact link or URL to run the report. If they don't have permissions down that path, they're not going to be able to run the report. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So what I would usually do when I was the administrator of reports, and it's been quite a while since I've done that, but I would start kind of like an upside down pyramid. At the top is where you want people to be able to see everything. And then I had like different department levels, and then the lower you go down your pyramid, your upside down pyramid, the more restrictive it becomes. So if I'm the manager of a department, I should be able to see everything in my department's folder. However, if I'm just you know, a developer or a DBA or just somebody that works in that department, maybe I can only see the first level or the first couple levels. So you really got to figure that out. So let's take a look at how to configure security. Again, I don't think that the people watching this video will be doing this per se, but you might be. So I just want to give a quick overview. So there's two, even though we've got this reporting services and we have the database, within reporting services, we also have two levels. One is at the site, and I can go here and click that little cog and go to site settings. And over on the left here, we've got security. And depending on what you want to do in your reporting services environment, just having built-in administrators at this level might be enough. If you have a group of people that you want to be able to use Report Builder, then you'll have to set them up as well. And the way you do that is go here, let's just say everyone. I think that will work, and choose system user and say okay, and that worked. So every system, so everyone is just basically a built-in group that includes everyone. Everyone using my VM is a system user, but only if they're the administrators are they a system administrator. I want to show you one other thing. You may have trouble bringing up your report or your web portal. And if you have trouble with that, what I would say is find your web browser. I'm going to do Internet Explorer here, so I know I can demonstrate that with that. Find Internet Explorer, right-click, run as administrator. Bring up the web portal, which is basically going to be localhost reports, and then add your own local account to this as an administrator. So there's a built-in security feature that keeps you from doing some things if you're an administrator on the box. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's just one of the ways that Microsoft locks down Windows. I think this one might be a server, so I'm not sure if it has it, because I don't think I've had that problem. And again, I believe that article that I talked about, you know, has that information. Another thing I want to show you is if I go to a particular folder, and again, don't put permissions on reports, put them on folders. Otherwise, you're going to be driving yourself crazy. So at the report level, I can click the little ellipsis and go to manage. And there's also a securities setting here where I can add a group of users. Typically, browser is going to be your most common one. That just means you can run a report in that folder. My reports is a special, kind of like my documents, little reports that you can see but nobody else can see. Content manager, they can manage, you know, create folders, things like that. Publisher, I'm not sure exactly how much different publisher and content manager is. Report builder is something different. I'm going to show you report builder in a minute, but report builder, if you remember from way back in the first week, report builder is a tool that was meant for very technical end users to build their own reports. I'll show you that at the end. I also want to show you one other thing if you're trying to set this up on your local system. If you go to look for Report Server Configuration Manager, when you first installed this, it was not configured. Mine's already configured, so I can't go through the steps, but basically you have to set up a database. And if you just kind of follow through the little wizard, again, take a look at that article that I pointed out. I believe it's got the step. You've got to set up a database first. You've got to set up a web service URL and a web portal URL. So the web portal URL is the one that we've been looking at. The web service URL is basically a service. If I have whatever I have, I make calls to the service returns an answer, which is basically the reports. So I'm going to close this and go over to report server, and you can see the same things, just not so pretty. Okay, so I'm not going to, again, I could spend probably a good 2 or 3 hours talking about security. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to the slides. So the main thing about today's class is talking about how do I get my reports published or deployed where other people can see them. You, as a report developer, you may or may not, have that responsibility. So assuming that you are going to publish it at least to maybe a development server, you have to set up some properties in your project saying where things are going to go. Not only do you set up that property of where that reporting services service is, you also have to set up there's some defaults, but like your data source folder, your shared data sets folder, things like that. You can deploy the entire project. You can deploy one object. So let's say that you have made a change to one report. You can right-click and deploy that one object. You can also upload objects. Occasionally, I've had some issues with timeouts and some other things where I found that uploading worked a lot better. Another thing to note, that when you're first getting started, there's no folders at all, and you need one for your data sources, for example. It gets set up automatically. The other thing to note is that security is always inherited from higher up. So we start out with reporting services letting everybody being able to see everything. And as we go down, as I mentioned on a previous slide, we become more restrictive. But first, security is inherited from up above. So if we have Joe Smith having ability to see this folder, when we add another folder underneath that, Joe Smith will automatically have rights unless we purposely go and take those rights away. So let's take a look at deploying. I'm going to switch back and forth between 2017 and 2019 today, because there is something that I absolutely could not find in 2019. And this one is, this is it. This is 2019. So here I've got the project a copy of the project that I worked on last week. So what I have to do is go to the project, right-click, and go to properties. And notice that we've got the same, actually that report server URL, not the web portal. Report server URL, because that's the service that's going to accept requests and return information. So when we are publishing, we publish to the report server, not to reports. You can also specify a target version. The last time that Microsoft made any really big changes to reporting services was 2016. So if I have 2016, 2017, or 2019, those are all going to be kind of compatible. If I have a if I have a, used to call it, did they call it report manager? Now I've forgotten. Now it's called web portal. I believe it used to be called the report manager. If we have an older reporting services installation, you can't publish newer reports unless they don't have any of the new features. There's also, so we've got some default folders, report parts, data sources, data sets, and a target folder. It's picking this week 7 up from the name of the project. So if that's not what you want, you can type something else in. It could be a folder that already exists, if that makes sense. There's another couple interesting things here. These are both set to false. And that's really important. So let's say that I publish to a reporting services installation that is pointing to my development data. I'm gonna go in there the first time it's published and change it and fix it so it's pointing to production. Later on, when I'm deploying reports, I don't want that to revert back to development. If we decided we want it to be production, that's what we want. So what happens here is if it sees the data set and data source with the same name in the same location, it's not going to overwrite it, because typically once you have it out there, that's what you want. The other interesting piece of information is this configuration. Active debug, there's some different configurations here. So theoretically, you could have one set of properties for development, another set of properties for production, something like that. However, when you are ready to deploy, I'm not seeing it here. I closed a bunch of windows trying to find something I'm going to show you in the next section, and end up lost what I was looking for. So there is another I will see if we can see it over here. I have accidentally, so see this debug right here, debug, release. Those have got to match. Okay, so you can't say, you can't, if you have one of them saying release, but have your project set to debug, things may not go where you expect them. And I have seen issues with that with some of my students. So what solution configuration? Let's see if I can get that back. Well, I'm not going to worry about that for right now. Okay, so let's say I want to go ahead and deploy this project and just let everything go where it's going to go. I'm going to right-click and just choose deploy. And then I'm going to pay attention to this output window. And it's saying it's skipping some things. However, I am pretty sure I deleted a bunch of things. So I'm surprised it's saying that. So eventually, you're going to look here. And you might see, if things go wrong, you'll probably see some clues to that. Maybe it's trying to go to a report server that you didn't expect, or some other error messages. Well, let's go back out here and click reload this page, and I should see some more folders. Unfortunately, it seems like it's a little slow on this box. And I've noticed that a lot with this VM, where it takes a while for this page to come up. And really, for the past, I've worked with reporting services since like 2003. I've never quite seen this behavior before. So I don't know if it's something with 2019 that's come up or what's going on. Okay, so now you see I've got data sources, data sets, reports was already there in week 7. So if I look at data sources, I've got AdventureWorks 2017 and also report properties, just like my project had. And I've also got a couple of shared data sets, which I'll talk about in a little bit. If you remember way back in probably week 2, I said, don't do shared data sets unless it's something you're really going to share often. The reason for that is that when people use Report Builder, they're going to grab from those shared data sets to build their reports. And you don't want to them to have 1,000 things to look through, okay? Or things that they really shouldn't use for that. So here I've got this company info, which I'll show you in a bit, and the list of years, that's something that we'd share, throughout all the reports. So let's take a look, and here's the data sources. And if I go to week 7, I can run my reports. You can change the names up here. There's an ID number that reporting service is going to keep track of. So even if I re-upload with a different name, I believe it will know where to go. And I can check. I hate to test things live that I haven't tested, so I'm going to hold off on that. What I generally recommend is that you give your report a user-friendly name inside your project. So then when you do deploy it, it will have that name. Okay, so let's say I make a change to this particular report, and I want to upload just that report. So let's say, let's go to parameters, year, default value. Let's say I want to change that to 2013. So I'm going to save the report and then go to the Solution Explorer. This is the one I changed. I'm going to right click and deploy. And watch the properties. It said that it did succeed. I'm going to go back out, click the report again, and it actually didn't change. And there's a reason for that, because I really didn't change a property of the report per se. I changed a property of the parameter, and the parameter is actually a published report part. So that's probably why that didn't work. Let me try something else. Let's give this a name. Let's call it and save it. And then let's go ahead and deploy again. It says it succeeded. I'm going to go back to week 7. Hopefully this time we see the change. And there's the change. Okay, so the other thing I can do is navigate to the folder and click upload. So I can upload an item. So let me grab my path to the report. Reports are RDL. Reports are RDL. Data files are stored data that's pulled from the SQL server. So it doesn't have to keep going and hitting the SQL server every time you just refresh your report when you're working. This is local. So I'm going to grab what if I changed, let's see, let me go to a different week, week 2, and grab this report. Something outside my project. Upload complete. And there is the report, but it didn't work. And the reason for that is it can't find the data source, or can't find the data source is what the issue is. It's worldwide importers. Okay, and that is not out there. So in a bit, I am going to show you how to fix issues like this. And back to the slides. Other thing that I've kind of alluded to a little bit is report parts. And this particular item, I could not find in Reporting Services 2019 in the Report Designer. I can find it in the old 2017. There is a workaround that I'll show you. So report parts are things like parameters that are reused, shared data sets, charts, all kinds of things that someone using Report Builder might want to use to pull together a dashboard. And when they're working in Report Builder, this is what it looks like. A Report Builder, which we touched on, week 1, we touched on it a little bit, but in some shops it's used quite a bit, and it's really handy to make some of these things available for your super users, your people that are technical enough to work with this. So let's take a look at that. So the idea is that if you have any shared data sets, they'll automatically be published in that folder. And again, I have said, don't do that unless there really is a good reason to. And I still stand by that. If it's a parameter that is going to be used over and over, a data set that your end users could reuse, those are great things to publish. So how do we do it? So we go up to report, and this report menu, as far as I can see, it's missing from 2019. So I'm in 2016 right now. Report, publish report parts. And what this does is not necessarily publish them, but it gives you the ability to. So we're looking at one particular report that's got a bunch of charts and gauges and maps on it. So what I want to do here is check the ones I want to publish. So notice that they are not named very well. What you could do is cancel out of this and go and name the objects in the properties window. That's probably the best idea, probably the best thing to do. But you can also do it here. I'm just gonna, give it some kind of user-friendly name. And if I expand this, I can also write a description of it and see, which one it is. This is great, whatever. So this one is that heat map. And this one is sales map. And click OK. Now I still have not published them. What I have done is I have just marked those items to be published as parts. And again, it's missing from 2019. I looked and looked and looked, put the question out on Twitter, never got an answer. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is right click and deploy again. Actually, this one's going to week 6 since I'm in a different Visual Studio here. So now when I go out here, I've got my week 6. And I've got sales chart because that's really all I deployed in this case. And will it work? I'm hoping it works because I was using, yeah, and it works. And the reason it just works is because I had used the same data source name and location. So that's why it automatically worked. I'm going to show you in a bit what to do if it doesn't. Okay, but let's go back to home and go to, I don't see report parts, and I am pretty sure it should have published those. And now it's going to take a while. I don't think I have to redeploy the entire solution, but that might be it. And I'm not seeing it. That is very odd. And it's not under there. I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to double click or make sure I've actually didn't cancel out of that. So I've got my things marked. Click OK. I'm just going to go ahead and deploy the entire solution, which seems odd that I would have to do that. So I'm getting some InventionWorks is up to date, data sources is up to date. Okay. I don't think it worked. And I know in 2019 it doesn't, there's no option even. But there is a workaround which involves Report Builder, which I will get to as soon as this refreshes. Just one more time to look and see if that report parts folder showed up. And there it is. And I don't have the reports part folder. This did work last week, which is odd. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to, let's go to week 6, and go to that sales chart and edit in Report Builder. So Report Builder, you're going to have to go out and download it to get it installed. The other thing is I can also go new paginated report. That's another way to launch it. But in both cases, you're going to have to install it the first time. Well, let's go here, edit in Report Builder. It's saying get it. It always says that, even though I've already got it. I'm going to open Report Builder. And so Report Builder looks a little different. For the most part, you do things the same way. However, it's got more wizards, and it lets you use report parts for building the report. Okay, it has more of an office look and feel instead of a Visual Studio look and feel. So what I do is go over to report parts. That just opens this over here. I go to File, Publish Report Parts. And I'm going to review and modify. And it's got everything checked. I'm going to go back and just do what I did before on a couple of them. It looks the same. However, this one will work. Let's do the map. Now look, it did save that comment I added before, and click Publish. And this will actually publish them to publish successfully, and close it and close out of that. Yes, I want to save the changes. So I really don't like this because I feel like once you're working with it in Report Builder, you've kind of broken the chain. You can pull it back into Visual Studio, but now you've got it, your line of changes kind of is broken. And I'm still not seeing, let's refresh this and see if hopefully I've got report parts. I'll let that go. Still taking a long time. And there I've got the report parts. So I see it is working with Report Builder. I'm going to have to check with Microsoft on what's going on. And so there I've got my sales chart and sales map. Now, how do I use these? If I go to New, Paginated Report, Report Builder is going to open up. And once it does, I can use, it's got more wizards than I had before. Table or matrix wizard, chart wizard, which we didn't have before. I'm going to go with blank report. And the report part gallery, I'm just going to type in the word sales. And there's my little map. Love to have that map on a dashboard. And along with it came my year parameter, my data source, and the data sets that were part of it. I can click this to run it, take a look and see how it looks. And I can also save my report. When I save my report, that means publish my report. So by default, you get this report server kind of, folder structure. Or you can save it locally, the RDIL file locally as well. So I'm going to click Save and close that up. And if I go back, I think, where was I? Was I in week 7? Thought I just saved it at home. Let's go to refresh. And wait and wait and wait. Hopefully this is just because this is a VM that doesn't have a lot of juice. You know, again, to learn more about the differences between Report Builder and working in Visual Studio, go back to week 1 because I do have a chart that week that talks about it. And there's my map report. So, you know, power users could build their own dashboards, but again, these reports are what they call pixel perfect. So you don't get automatically drilled through that type of thing. So I would say, you know, this is my opinion, that companies are moving away from using Report Builder for this type of thing and going towards Power BI. You know, could be wrong, but that is really what I think. Let's go back to the slides and see. I've got a few more things to talk about. Oh, updating data sources. One issue that comes up if you haven't been consistent with naming your data sources, or if you use embedded data sources, is that you may have to modify your data source when you publish a report. So I'm going to go and take a look at, I had one that had an embedded data source, this particular report. Used an embedded data source instead of the shared data. And I don't want to have to manage that. I don't want to have the server move and, you know, down the road have a problem because now this data source wasn't originally set up correctly. So the way around that, and if you do uploading of reports, you also may have to do this. If you always use data sources and use the naming convention, things should just work. You'll end up with a lot of manual work if you do embedding, or if you have different names, you don't have a good naming convention. So let's go to week 7, and there's my embedded data source report. So I'm going to go to manage and go to data sources. So in this case, it's got this custom data source, this custom connection. I'm just going to switch it to the shared data source and navigate to that shared data source and click save. And so now, even if I republish that report, those properties are going to stick. It's not going to go back to the embedded. So I really like that. There are situations where, you know, you have to create the data source from scratch. So if I go back to home and go to data sources, so let's say I need to set one up like for wide world importers, something like that. I can go to new data source. You have to give it a name. So wide world importers, a description, and a connection string. There's no builder here. So the issue here is that you probably want to go back to your report project and copy and paste the connection string in. And then there's some things to do with the credentials. One thing that I've found is that with my students, when they would go and modify this, they were getting, and clicking test connection, they were getting a weird bogus error message saying they didn't have permissions. And I would go and I made sure they had permissions. So that error message just was kind of bogus. And I wish I had it in front of me. I don't right now. There's something about them not having rights. Then when they go and test the report would work. So that seems like a bug unless it's been fixed since within the last year or so. All right, so let's see what's next. Importing items. So if you have permission as a report builder or higher, you can download the definitions from the web portal. So that's one way to pull it. In fact, I got a question the other day. We don't have the source code. How can we make modifications to these reports? And so, yeah, you can just download the definition from the web portal if you have permission to do that. You can, in my project, I can also import from other, I should say import anything from another project right there. Let me change that. And these files are just XML files. Theoretically, you could edit them by hand or even create them by hand. Probably not going to do that. In all the years I've used them, I've only once or twice had to manually edit the XML, just because there was something that was in a different location on my in my web portal than, you know, something that was in a different project that I had to open and link to, something like that. Let me just show you bringing something in from another project. Typically, you can just right-click, add existing item, and then navigate. So in this case, this is actually the same report. Let's go to week 4. So here I'm just adding an RDL. It becomes part of it. Is this going to automatically work? It might, because I have used a shared data source with the same name. So it should automatically just work. So as long as you stay consistent, you can do things like that. And it just makes a copy of it. It's not pointing to the original. So keep that in mind. Let's see, I was going to show you downloading. So if I am in reporting services and I go to reports, I can go here and download. So if I click download, that means download the definition. And then I can pull that into a project. Let's go back. There's one more thing I want to show you. We're just about out of time. And that's working with templates. So let's say your company says we always have to have a certain look and feel to our reports. This is a way you can do this. However, the reports are, everything's embedded in the report, basically. If we come back and say, you know, we're going to have a new logo, you've got to change it in all your reports, chances are that's going to be inside your report. Okay. I'm also going to show you a way that you can put that logo out on the network and not have to worry about it as much, as long as the size doesn't change. Excuse me. Okay, so how do we do a template? Well, first, I think I'm going to show you this reusability thing that I was talking about. So what I did, and you'd have to do this on one of your network SQL servers, not local. I created a database called Report Properties that has the company name and the location of the logo. And I actually saved that logo in reporting services, so that was kind of handy. And also a valid from and a valid to. The reason I did that is if you have a change that's happening and you have to have it at a certain date, you could add another row in here so that things switch over on the correct date. So I have that piece of information. So let me go back out to week 7. And here's my report template that I created. Let's get rid of some things here. So I have an image control that's using an expression. It's external. It's using an expression, and it's getting the data from that table that I just showed you, the company info. So if I look at the data set for this company info, and this is a shared data set. It's shared because I'm going to use this in 1,000 reports. Okay, so that's how that's set up. I also have an expression also pulling from that for the company name. So when I preview this, and I could add things like we always want the date and time and page number and, you know, whatever it is, okay? But once you create a report, it's no longer connected to the template. The template is like creating a copy of an original, okay? If I make a change to the template, it does not affect other things in the future. Other things in the past, I should say. It only affects the future. Okay, so how would I get this in place so that I can use this template? So I have got an odd place on my VM because I was for Visual Studio 2019, and the reason is I was running out of space on the C drive and I didn't want to rebuild the VM. So I'm just going to copy this. And at first I couldn't even find it. And what it turned out to be is that the way I ended up finding it is I knew that I would need a file called report.ico for icon. And I just did a search on that until I found it. And you may have to do that as well. So let me go to that folder. And paste it in. So this is the folder where all the pieces of that new object menu come from. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is copy in and again, take a look at the slides because it's got the steps. I need to copy in. Let me grab that to get back to where my report is. Let's go to week 7. And there's my template. Nope, here's my template. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste it here. I need to be an administrator. Okay. So now I've got the file there. The next thing I need to do is create an icon. So I'm going to right click, copy, and paste, or I might have some other icon I would like to use. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it report template. I'm going to call it company template. How about that? And I'm going to change this also, the company template. They need to be the same name. Okay. So I've got those two pieces in place. The next thing I need to do is go back to the original and look at the XML. Right click, view code, and go to the very bottom of it and copy out this report ID. I'm just going to paste it in my notepad here because I'm also going to have to type in or copy something else. And back when I was learning how to do this, I was not able to find good answers, even asking the reporting services team at Microsoft on this. So you go to this file here, and you can open, I'm just going to send it to, I'm going to just open it with regular Notepad. And I am going to paste in what it said from my slides, and we're going to call that company template. And then the report ID that I grabbed out of the report and fill it in there. And from what I understand, you have to leave this as report RDL. And I never really got any great answers about these numbers. I think they have to do with like an item number and position, something like that. So I'm just going to change this, I think, to 26. I'm not really sure on those numbers. And again, I could not get a good answer. And it's read only, so that's no good. I'm going to have to come in here and right click. Nope. Right click and go to properties. And it doesn't say read only, but it's not letting me save it. Nope. Not letting me save it. So I am just going to, I might have to be running as an administrator to do it. So I'm going to skip that. I think it might work without that. So let's see. I'm going to close Visual Studio and go ahead and launch it again, because I think the other day I got it to work without that piece, but I believe it is supposed to go there. I go to Solution Explorer, and of course everything's running slow. If I go right click, add new item, there's the company template. So it is showing up even though I didn't get it in that last little file where it was supposed to go. And there's my report, my new report. It says company template 1. So I have one more thing to show you. And I don't know how popular it is. Again, it's one of those things that now we've got Power BI. This is also an extra download the first time you run it. Mobile reports. It's a new way to do charts and graphs and maps, and it's actually a lot simpler, I believe, my opinion, than the ones built into the traditional paginated reports. To play with it, it has some data already built in, so you can see how it's going to look before you connect it to the real data. I'm just going to drag a couple of these in here. I'm not going to spend time showing you this. Again, I have a whole class out on Pluralsight just on this topic, a couple-hour class. You can, look at, how's it going to look on a tablet? How's it going to look on a phone? It's a lot different. The items have much fewer properties to set, and it's really easy. I haven't heard much about these in the last couple of years, so I don't really know how popular they are over something like Power BI. But it is something, to take a look at. They're pretty fun to do. So I think that is really everything I want to cover, really, with reporting services. There could be so much more. I know that my students who I teach the beginning to, usually once a year or so, they come up with all kinds of things I've never thought of doing, like making a report page that looks like a calendar, for example, all kinds of really interesting things. With management, man, today I've going through this. I'm barely touching the surface. There's so many other things. Subscriptions, that's a big deal with reporting services where reports just run automatically. There's caching, ways to make reports run faster and still be fresh data. Reports in different systems, reports against analysis services or reports against Oracle or Excel, all kinds of different things that you can do. But since this is an introductory course, I feel like I've given it given it enough coverage to make it worthwhile. So be sure to check out all of the other classes that Redgate's offering, and I'm sure we're going to keep doing fun things like this. Thank you so much for watching this course, and be sure to send any questions that you have to that Redgate forum. So it's so long for now, and good luck with reporting services.